Hi guys, this is Moo Power here doing another commentary. This time is going to be a Protoss versus Protoss matchup. So finally I'm going to do a mirror matchup here. And in a Protoss versus Protoss matchup, I'm actually not that great at because I haven't practiced that very frequently. Uh, in mirror matches, it generally can come down to a build order loss, unless the skill level is just vastly different. Not to say that if you lose on the build order, like you're totally lost, but it is an uphill battle if you pick the inferior build. It kind of can feel like a rock paper scissors game because in certain cases, like for example, in this matchup, in a mirror matchup, if I decide to go to gateway and my opponent decides to tech up, but also creates enough units to successfully ward off my two gateway pressure, then I would be technologically behind, and he can use that to his advantage and also pressure me with his dragoons, because dragoons in a critical mass against zealots will just dance around, and the zealots won't be able to do any damage to the dragoons if you micro it right. And then that will obviously force me to be a little more defensive once he gets that critical mass of dragoons. So that's just one example. Another example would be like, let's say if I decide to go DTs and my opponent goes the Reaver route, then he obviously would have observers in time to see my Dark Templars, and they wouldn't do any damage, while his Reavers would do a lot more damage in a fight versus DTs would. So that's another a build order loss that could potentially decide the game. But even pro gamers that go DT and the other player goes robotics to get the Reavers and observers, they don't automatically lose. I mean, they still can apply pressure with the DT because with the robotics tech, the Protoss player in the mirror match has to decide when to get the observer, because they only build one robotics, so they gotta decide when to build the Reaver, when to build the shuttle and the observer. They can't just all build at the same time. So likely what's going to happen is they're going to get their Reaver, and then they're going to get their first observer. Their first observer, if they choose to use that observer to scout your base, then that observer is not with them to defend against their DTs. So defensive Protoss might keep their observer with them until they have a second observer to push out. So as the DT Protoss player could do is take advantage of that and expand, or do something else. So it's not always like set in stone just because you lost the build order that you automatically lose the game. But it's just one of those things you have to take into account as far as who's ahead or who has the advantage. So there's always pros and cons to everything, but here I think in this game I was just deciding to go standard, like I do in most games. Especially when I'm trying to improve, I rather practice my standard game, and then once I'm solid in my mechanics, then I would want to, kind of branch out into exploring other strategies. I'd rather, kind of go in order in that sense. So yeah, I'm just scouting around his base, see if he's gonna use, if he's gonna go a certain tech, and by keeping my probe there as long as I can, it can potentially delay him in getting a tech building. So that could play to my advantage. Like, even though I won't see what tech building he's going to be placing, that could potentially, that could obviously delay what he wants to do until he makes sure that I can't see what he's doing. So I think his probe was already killed by my two zealots at the ramp, so I can kind of push out a little bit. So I'm gonna plan to just go Reavers here. I'm gonna fast expand and then get my Reavers in time to defend. That's my goal. So I'm pretty much gonna be in a defensive posture until I get my economy going. And I noticed that he wasn't pumping a lot of units at the start. He only got 1 Zealot and a Dragoon, while I was pumping 2 Zealots and 2 Dragoons. So by the time I get to his base, I mean, we might be equal, but I just want to poke in to see what kind of units he's building. Obviously, if he doesn't build a lot of Dragoons, that could point out that he's saving his gas for Dark Templar tech, or maybe he wants to go for Fast Reaver. But in any case, any information could prove to be valuable. So you always want to apply a little bit of pressure, or at least try to see what your opponent is doing. So here, I'm not expecting to end the game right here, but I'm just trying to poke in and see what units he's got. So yeah, so I'm gonna try to keep macroing it up, and then here I'm gonna go in, see what he has. See, he only has 2 Zealots or 1 Zealot and 2 Dragoons. I think it was a little bit of a mistake to kind of back off too much, but I was just kind of focused on multitasking, that I didn't take advantage of him having less of a unit count. So that was kind of a mistake on my part. I could have punished him a little bit more, but now he has his 3 Dragoons, and 3 Dragoons versus this, I think I have a disadvantage, especially going up the ramp, so I better back off here. So I'm pretty confident in this matchup against this guy, because his macro doesn't seem to be going as fast as me. So I feel comfortable taking the early expansion and being able to defend it. Now I could go aggressive, but then again, it's hard to bust up that ramp, so I'd rather just take the economic advantage. And you see here my observer is now scouting, and I see that he went for the Reaver tech, same as me. So all I've got to do is successfully defend, and while my expansion is going up earlier than him, I'll have a significant advantage economically, and especially macro-wise, because you know, you saw the unit count. I had more of a ground army than him at the start. So as long as I'm keep pumping my units and defend this successfully, I should be in good shape. So yeah, I'm gonna keep a couple of Dragoons at the top right here, because I know he's probably gonna come right here. So you see that the shuttle tries to come in, and my Dragoons are already anticipating that shuttle. So that was good part on me. So yeah, the observer I'm trying to be careful with, because obviously if he has an observer in his base and his Dragoons see my observer, then obviously he can snipe mine, while I can't do the same because I'm in his base. But what I need to do now is be scouting for his army. That's one thing I should say to myself, is I should always be on top of where his army is at, because if he is right in front of my door right here, which he is, if you see in the minimap, then I'm in trouble if I can't defend this. So here he comes in with his army, and because remember, I had to keep some Dragoons at my main base to defend against any potential drops, but at the same time I got to defend here, so that's why my units were kind of out of position. But a little bit of miss micro there. I should have picked up those Reavers a little quicker. But yeah, in any case, I pretty much win this battle because it was 2 Reavers against 1, and he's just commending me in my skill, I guess. But yeah, I had the superior army. I had an economic advantage, and other than the miss micro with the Reavers, I think I did a pretty decent job. But yeah, the Reaver micro is something I'm trying to improve, so doing this Protoss versus Protoss matchup is definitely you know, good practice. And yeah, I think this guy was a cool player, so I whispered to him GG, and yeah, so that was just kind of a textbook build order loss. I felt like either his build order was inferior, and perhaps his macro wasn't that great. But yeah, that kind of just ties into how all these skills come into play. Like if your macro sucks, it doesn't matter if you try to do a build order, because you're not utilizing that build order to the maximum efficiency. So even if he had the build order to counter me, he didn't have the macro to support that. And or vice versa, if you have the macro to support something but you lose to a build order, then that could be a potential way you lose still, even though you have better macro. So in this matchup, I would say I had the better build order, I feel. I'm not sure exactly when he decided to get Reavers. If he got the robotics before he got the second gateway, or if he got the second gateway before the robotics, that can play a big factor too in your timing pushes. But yeah, here I'm just, I usually stay after the game and just kind of wreck their bases as like a trophy, um, or just feeling of dominating my opponent even further. But yeah, that was pretty much it.